One of them clutched a stun gun while her partner kept a knife tucked inside her jacket. Inside that house, 6-year-old Sadie Hartley sat by herself since her boyfriend Ian was currently in Switzerland, expecting her for a ski trip in 48 hours. She was likely winding down for the night, her mind already drifting to the vacation ahead. When the knock came, Sadie didn't feel a hint of fear because she had zero clue who was lurking out there in the dark. She'd never even laid eyes on these strangers and didn't know one harbored a hateful obsession toward her. The events that followed would rattle the entire country because this wasn't some random break-in. It was a calculated execution fueled by jealousy and a warped idea that taking Sadie out would fix everything.
Think you can handle the grimmest tales from across the pond? Check out our fresh release, Unreal True Crime British Edition.
We've got 35 hair-raising murder mysteries that will leave you absolutely breathless, available right now on Amazon in print or Kindle. You can also snag the instant PDF directly from our site by clicking the links down in the description. Grab your copy before you forget, but for now, let's get back to the story at hand. Sadie Hartley entered the world on May 20th, 1956. Born in Oldham, Greater Manchester, back when England was still shaking off the dust of World War II. The nation was in the middle of a Reconstruction era, and folks were finally starting to feel optimistic again. Queen Elizabeth had only worn the crown for 4 years, and the sounds of rock and roll were just beginning to hit the radio. Sadie was born into a blue-collar household that put a high premium on honest labor and good schooling. Her folks brought her up in a humble house in Oldham, an industrial town where massive cotton mills used to define the skyline. Even as a toddler, Sadie displayed a spark of curiosity that set her apart. She was that kid who questioned everything, and her parents realized pretty quick that she was sharp as a tack. She got a kick out of roaming the block and hanging out with the other kids in the neighborhood. Sadie went to a grade school in Oldham where the staff immediately picked up on her smarts and drive. She wasn't the class clown making noise, but she was always tuned in and meticulous with her assignments. Her report cards were nothing but stellar, particularly when it came to the hard sciences and math. Growing up, Sadie was well-rounded. She could socialize effortlessly, but also cherished her solo time with a good book. She stuck to a tight circle of best friends instead of trying to be popular with the massive cliques. That trait stuck with her forever because she always valued real bonds over surface-level acquaintances. Her bond with her folks was loving as they pushed her to learn and celebrated every win. Back at the house, Sadie pitched in with housework and acted way more mature than her age suggested. She knew her parents busted their backs for her, and she never took their support for granted. Sadie loved the usual kid stuff like biking around, playing hopscotch on the sidewalk, or getting lost in adventure novels. She had a soft spot for critters and was constantly dragging strays home, begging her folks to let them stay. You know, you could already see that grit she'd have as an adult once she decided on a goal. She made it happen. When she hit high school, she kept crushing it academically without skipping a beat. She went to a local public school and aced every class, convincing teachers she was destined for big things. As a teen, Sadie grew into herself with a quiet confidence that never crossed the line into cockiness. She was liked well enough to have a solid crew, but she didn't care about being the star of the show. Her nose was always in the books because she realized early on that school was her ticket out. While other kids were acting out, Sadie stayed tight with her family and listened to their advice, already mapping out her future. She craved her own money and a career that actually meant something. Watching her parents scrape by on modest paychecks made her hell-bent on crafting a more prosperous life through sheer hustle. Once high school was in the rearview, Sadie chased a degree and got trained in business admin. She was a pioneer in her family regarding college, taking classes in finance and management to break into the corporate world. Her career kicked off with desk jobs, but Sadie wasn't the type to settle for being a secretary forever. She had big dreams and kept her eyes peeled for any chance to climb the ladder. She climbed the corporate ladder at different firms, soaking up every bit of operational knowledge she could find. Once she hit her 20s, Sadie struck out solo, leasing a modest apartment that fit within her budget. Living independently was her world, so she styled the place solo and relished calling all the shots. Flying solo forced her to depend on herself, toughening up a character that was already made of steel. During those 2 decades, she navigated the dating scene with various boyfriends, ranging from flings to long-term partners. She eventually tied the knot only to split later. a tough lesson in bouncing back when things fall apart. Splitting up was rough, yet she carried herself with class and refused to let the heartache destroy her. She kept a tight crew around her, mixing professional associates with her closest inner circle buddies, dining out, catching shows, and jet setting whenever possible were her jams. She thrived on discovering fresh spots. An insatiable curiosity drove her desire to witness every corner of the globe before her time was up. Keeping things on an even keel, she ground hard Monday through Friday and really let loose on her days off. While she didn't crave nonstop thrills, she definitely valued quality time with friends over a solid meal and deep chats. Approaching her 60s, the woman had constructed a professional legacy that was nothing short of remarkable. As a successful entrepreneur, she secured the wealth she once fantasized about, residing in a gorgeous Helm Shore estate tucked away in the country. Her residence felt cozy, yet upscale, standing as a testament to her refined style and decades of hustle. Romance was in the air with Ian Johnston, a guy she had been dating steadily for quite a few years. The couple clicked perfectly, sharing a similar vibe since Ian was also a high achiever in the business world. To her, the bond seemed solid and promising, while her bank account remained completely healthy and stable. After grinding for decades, she finally got to sit back and savor the rewards of all that effort. With funds to burn on trips and luxuries, she escaped her parents' financial stress and looked ahead with bright eyes. Conversations with Ian often revolved around their shared bucket list, featuring more vacations and pure enjoyment. Hitting the big 6 to 0 meant she could finally ease off the gas and appreciate her empire, feeling mentally great. Career success, a solid partner, and a lovely nest gave her a sense of total peace and satisfaction. Absolutely no red flags popped up to suggest her existence was about to be threatened in any way. Getting the full picture requires diving into Sarah Williams and the messy romantic tangles she spun around herself. Since the tender age of 17, Sarah had been locked into a lengthy partnership with a man named David Hardwick. This guy was loaded, running his own successful enterprise in the heating industry and stacking serious cash. Meeting at a Cheshire stable, the 57-year-old was already hitched to Rowena when their paths first crossed. Even with 4 decades separating them, the pair kicked off a physical affair that dragged on for almost 20 years. Operating as her benefactor, he bankrolled her existence, depositing 320 pounds weekly directly into her funds. From gas money to credit bills, he handled it all, once dropping a cool 75,000 pounds in her lap. The duo jetted off on a dozen ski trips annually, one time spending 3 whole months chilling in Canada. She resided in a property on his dime while he kept playing house with his actual spouse, Rowena. Her resume included a bank gig and a sales role at an indoor ski resort in Manchester. Without his wallet, she would have crashed and burned, relying entirely on his handouts to stay afloat. Despite the cash, she kept her options open while nagging him to dump his wife, which he refused. While keeping David on the hook, she was busy hooking up with plenty of other guys on the side. Instructors at her job became her targets for flings, all while her main sponsor remained completely in the dark. She buried these trysts deep, hiding them from the very guy who was signing all her checks. The two women never once stood in the same room, sharing zero history, friends, or even a brief hello. The only thread tying these strangers together was a single guy by the name of Ian Johnston. Ian had been dating Sadie for quite a while, though things were occasionally hot and cold between them. Like any pair, they hit bumps but loved hard, marking nearly 8 years together by 2013. Back in September of 2013, Ian crossed paths with Sarah at that same snowy indoor facility. Working as a slope coach, she was significantly younger than him. They swapped digits and immediately kicked things off with a flurry of suggestive texts back and forth. Despite Ian's commitment to Sadie and Sarah's life with David Hardwick, the two launched into an illicit romance, sneaking around for hookups and keeping the whole thing under wraps. Sarah viewed this connection as far more significant than the random dalliances she had engaged in before. She fell hard, convinced they shared a unique bond, yet Ian viewed the situation through a completely different lens. Leaving his partner was never part of his plan, so after roughly half a year, right around the start of 2014, he cut ties with his mistress. He made it crystal clear that he was taken and intended to remain loyal to his actual girlfriend. Although she was aware of the other woman from day one, she simply refused to take no for an answer. All the while, she kept shacking up with David Hardwick, happy to let him foot the bills. David remained clueless about Ian Johnston or her other side flings, but once the breakup happened, her behavior spiraled into a dangerous fixation she just could not shake. The reality that he picked someone else was impossible for her to process. She felt entitled to him and viewed his partner as the sole barrier to their bliss. By September 2014, half a year post-breakup, she decided to execute a strategic maneuver. She penned a missive directly to his girlfriend, spilling every dirty detail about the cheating. It was a vicious note, graphically claiming their intimacy was mind-blowing and far superior to anything else he had ever experienced. The text insisted they had an insatiable appetite for one another, asserting that he had urges only she could satisfy. She was certain this bombshell would blow the couple's life apart. The goal was to force a breakup or make him realize he actually belonged with her. However, the scheme blew up in her face when the pair discussed the infidelity and chose to stick it out. They committed to repairing the damage, yet Williams perceived the outcome in a totally different light. Denial consumed her regarding his decision to proceed without her, fueling a lingering obsession despite the affair being dead and buried. She kept tabs on his existence, followed his trail, and grew hyper-focused on his domestic life with his partner. The two women had no actual interaction or evolving dynamics since their paths did not naturally cross. Nevertheless, the ex-mistress forced her way in by shadowing the unsuspecting woman from the shadows. Digging into every facet of the victim's existence, from her daily schedule to her house layout, the stalker's fixation turned increasingly sinister. To her, the other woman was merely a hurdle to be removed rather than a human being. Warped logic convinced her that eliminating the competition would automatically drive him back into her arms. A horrific plot started to take shape, with her pal Katrina Walsh roped in as an accomplice, while the target remained blissfully ignorant. The victim continued her regular routine, never suspecting eyes were on her or that a threat was looming. With zero red flags or intimidating notes to tip her off, she was defenseless as Williams ramped up the stalking in the lead up to the crime. High-tech gadgets and old-fashioned tailing allowed her to map out the woman's every step. Figuring out the timetable, solo hours, and alarm systems became her mission, which is when Walsh became a key player. As a longtime confidant, Katrina hung out constantly with the ringleader and knew all her buried skeletons. She idolized her bold companion and placed a massive premium on their bond. Conversation started shifting toward the fixation on Ian, initially masquerading as typical post-breakup gripping. Slowly, the tone grew more menacing, painting the current girlfriend as a nemesis to be defeated. Holding the rival responsible for stealing her joy, she found a willing ear in Katrina, who never once challenged the delusion. Rather than intervening, she validated the crazy talk and eventually signed on to assist when the idea of taking action came up. It remains a mystery if the accomplice truly grasped the gravity of her commitment in the beginning. Regardless, she morphed into an enthusiastic co-conspirator in a homicide plot, helping to draft the blueprint. Together, they looked up killing techniques, bought the necessary gear, and rehearsed the grim task. Chats and texts flew back and forth as they organized the hit with the detached efficiency of a corporate merger. The target spotted nothing out of the ordinary in those last days, sticking to her job and enjoying downtime with her man. Without knowing the stalker or the threat level, she had zero cause for alarm. Feeling upbeat and eager for dates with her partner, personal security was the last thing on her mind. Residing in a tranquil, low-crime hamlet, she felt perfectly protected within her own walls. When January 13th, 2016 rolled around, the day began with a standard shift at work. She wrapped up her work for the day and headed back to Helmshore, knowing she'd have the house to herself since Ian was out of town that night. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, so she just pulled into the driveway and let herself inside without a second thought. She likely fixed herself a bite to eat, caught up on some TV, and started winding down for bed, just like she had 1,000 times before. What Sadie didn't realize was that Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh were gearing up to execute their deadly scheme. The pair knew perfectly well that Ian was gone and that Sadie was sitting there all alone. They had been stalking her, patiently waiting for this exact window of opportunity to open up. Right around midnight on January 14th, 2016, the two women crept up on Sadie's property in Helmshore. Decked out in dark gear and carrying their tools, they had made the trek from Chester, sticking to back roads to dodge security cameras. Inside, Sadie was just chilling out, probably getting ready to turn in or maybe already asleep. She didn't have a worry in the world, feeling completely secure in her quiet, low-crime neighborhood. As the women stepped up to the door, they knew exactly how they were going to force their way in. What followed was the grim payoff of months spent plotting every cold, hard calculation. Shortly after the clock struck 12 on January 14th, 2016, Williams and Walsh breached the home, executing their vision with terrifying accuracy. The moment they crossed the threshold, they launched their assault on Sadie. Sarah blasted her with a stun gun, dropping her with a jolt of electricity that left her totally blindsided. With zero chance to fight back or scream, Sadie lay paralyzed while Sarah began stabbing her over and over. It was a relentless, savage attack where Sarah showed absolutely no heart, plunging the knife in more than 40 times. Fueled by pure obsession and green-eyed envy, the frenzy ended with Sadie taking her last breath right there in her own hallway. The whole thing was over fast, but the level of violence was off the charts. The gory scene screamed premeditated murder rather than a botched burglary, and the duo fled immediately after finishing the job. They sped off believing they were in the clear, totally oblivious to the trail of breadcrumbs they had left behind. Tragedy struck the next morning, January 14th, when Ian Johnston came home and stumbled upon Sadie's body. Horrified by the gruesome scene, he frantically dialed emergency services for help. The woman he adored had been slaughtered in her sanctuary, and cops swarmed the place minutes later. They taped off the scene and started digging, though even the seasoned detectives were rattled by the brutality. Murders like this just didn't happen in the sleepy countryside of Lancashire. Forensics combed through every square inch, eventually locating the stun gun used to subdue Sadie. They bagged DNA samples and fingerprints, noting that the sheer volume of blood pointed to a ferocious struggle. Detectives started out by trying to figure out who would want Sadie dead. She was a well-liked professional without a real enemy in the world, so they scrutinized her career and private affairs for clues. At first glance, nothing made sense as to why anyone would want to take her life. The lab results filled in the blanks, confirming she had been zapped with high voltage before the knife work began. With over 40 stab wounds on her body, it was clear the killer was driven by extreme rage or focus. Pinpointing the time of death to the late night or early morning, police grilled Ian Johnston for answers. They checked his alibi, phone logs, and love life, but the grieving partner was an open book with nothing to hide. Once he was cleared, investigators pivoted to digging into the skeletons in Ian's romantic closet. That is when Sarah Williams popped up on the radar, and what they learned about his ex was deeply troubling. Turns out she never really got over him after they split up. She was totally obsessed, stalking his every move, so detectives pulled her digital history to see what was up. The data was a goldmine. She had been tracking Sadie with GPS bugs and Googling how to kill someone. Her browser history was a how-to guide for murder, covering everything from stun guns to dodging security cams. The smoking gun appeared when police cracked the communications between Sarah and her pal, Katrina Walsh. Their text and call logs painted a damning picture of a plot that had been simmering for months. They had hashed out every grisly detail, leaving a mountain of evidence that was impossible to ignore. To top it off, traffic cams caught Sarah's car heading straight for Helm Shore the night Sadie died. Additional cams caught the car peeling out of the zone right at daybreak. Detectives traced the path and verified it synced up with the murder timeline. Sarah Williams jumped to the top of the list as the main suspect. The case stacking up against her was heavy. Her fixation on Ian Johnston was impossible to miss. Text swapped with Katrina Walsh revealed a meticulously crafted scheme. Her location data from that fatal night placed her smack in the middle of the crime scene. Sarah attempted to cook up an alibi, swearing she was tucked away at her place in Chester when the killing went down. But the digital trail told a different story, with cell towers, GPS logs, and security cams all poking holes in her excuse. The very text she used to hunt Sadie ended up tracking her own steps. It also didn't take long for Katrina Walsh's role in the mess to come into focus. She wasn't just a bystander, she helped hatch the plot and was right there when the attack happened. Even though Sarah seemed to be the ringleader, Katrina had her hands dirty in the killing too. Authorities slapped handcuffs on both of them. At the start, Sarah stuck to her guns about being innocent, but the proof was overwhelming. She wasn't nearly as smart as she figured she was. High-tech forensics and digital footprints caught every detail. Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh were officially charged with murder. The trial kicked off a few months after they were booked. The state rolled out a mountain of proof showing cold-blooded planning and savage violence. Prosecutors walked the jury through months of scheming, found in call logs, endless texts, and web history. They laid out the GPS maps that illustrated exactly how Sarah had shadowed Sadie. They displayed the stun gun used and highlighted just how vicious the stabbing really was. The nail in the coffin was the chatter between Sarah and Katrina. Their texts revealed ice-cold logic and a definite aim to kill. They had hashed out the specifics of how to end Sadie, picked the time, and strategized on dodging the cops. Defense attorneys tried to poke holes here and there, but the case against their clients was just too airtight. No one could reasonably question who took Sadie's life or the motive behind it. Sarah's infatuation with Ian Johnston was plain as day. Because she couldn't handle him moving forward, she resorted to killing. People took the stand to describe Sarah's stalker-like habits after she and Ian split. Buddies mentioned she wouldn't shut up about the guy. She lurked on his profiles, cruised by his hangouts, and wouldn't admit they were done. Jurors listened to details about the endless hours Sarah spent spying on Sadie. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment snap or a sudden fit of rage. It was calculated, prepped, and carried out with icy resolve. In August 2016, the gavel came down guilty for both Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh. The decision was handed down after the jury really weighed all the facts. The proof didn't allow for any other outcome. Sarah Williams got slapped with life behind bars, with no shot at parole for at least 35 years. Katrina Walsh was handed a life sentence too, with the same 35-year minimum. The judge called the act evil and bone-chilling in how it was thought out and done. The court listened to emotional statements from Sadie's kin and Ian Johnston. They painted a picture of a sweet, accomplished lady who hustled her whole life and earned a peaceful retirement. Instead, a delusional stalker robbed her of everything. Losing Sadie wrecked everyone in her orbit. Her folks lost a cherished daughter and family member. Ian Johnston lost his better half and the life they were building. Pals lost a friend they truly loved. The murder sent shockwaves through the sleepy Lancashire town Sadie called home. Helmshore wasn't the kind of spot where people got killed. The savagery of the attack spooked the locals and shook their feeling of security. The press was all over this story. Had all the ingredients that grab headlines: fatal obsession, stalking, meticulous plotting, and horrific violence. This tragedy shone a spotlight on how dangerous fixations can get and why stalking needs to be flagged immediately. Legal analysts pointed to this as a textbook case of how obsession can spiral into bloodshed. Sarah Williams had shown plenty of red flags that she was unhinged, but nobody tipped off the cops who could have stepped in. Sadie lives on in memory as a tough, smart, high achiever who got a raw deal. She hurdled challenges, created a great life, and found joy. That joy was snatched away by a stranger she hadn't even crossed paths with. The clues were all there. Sarah's relentless tracking of Ian, her refusal to move on, and her bitter rants about Sadie to her pals. These actions screamed of a person who wasn't handling a breakup well at all. If anyone had clocked the threat and alerted the police, Sadie might still be with us. Sadie Hartley earned the right to enjoy her golden years in peace. She ground hard, made a name for herself, and found love once more. She never hurt a fly or threatened a soul, but she ended up in the crosshairs of a maniac and paid the ultimate price. Thanks for tuning in to follow the heartbreaking timeline of Sadie Hartley and the legacy she left behind. This tragedy really highlights why we need to pay attention to red flags and keep our guard up against dangerous obsessions. If you got value from this deep dive, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you catch every new upload. We explore mysteries across the globe, but the priority is always honoring the human beings behind the headlines. Jump into the comments to let me know your perspective on the investigation and what major lessons you took away from her experience. While you are down there, feel free to drop some names of other cases you think deserve a spotlight in our next episode. I personally go through the feedback to see what matters to you, and your ideas definitely help shape this channel. Always listen to that inner voice. If something feels off, stay vigilant and report anything suspicious to the pros. Thanks for hanging out. It was barely past 12 on January 14th, 2016, when a pair of women in black outfits walked up to a quiet home in Helmshore, Lancashire.